I was 70 when the past I buried at 17 quietly found its way back to me, slipping into my life like it had never truly left. And in that moment I felt something shift deep inside my chest that I could not explain. Welcome to Mom's True Revenge, a place where stories like mine are told. And before I go further, I often wonder, where are you watching from? And if this story speaks to you, you may want to stay with me until the end. That morning felt ordinary, calm and slow, until I noticed the envelope resting on my table. My name written in a handwriting I had not seen in over 50 years. My fingers trembled as I picked it up, because part of me already knew who it might be from. Yet I was not ready to admit it. I had spent decades convincing myself that what happened at 17 was just a mistake, something time would quietly erase. But as I stared at that letter, unopened and heavy in my hands, I realized time had not erased anything at all, and what waited inside was something I might never be able to undo. I held that letter for a long time, longer than I want to admit, because opening it felt like reopening a part of my life I had carefully locked away. And yet something inside me would not let me put it down. The room felt unusually quiet, almost as if the walls themselves were waiting. And when I finally slid my finger under the seal, my heart began to pound in a way it had not in years. Inside was a single sheet of paper, neatly folded. And the moment I saw the first line, my breath caught because it was unmistakably his voice speaking through those words. He did not start with anger or blame, which somehow made it worse. And instead he wrote something simple that made my hands shake even more. I thought I had prepared myself for anything, but I had not prepared for kindness after what I had done. Then I reached the part where he mentioned that day, the one I had tried to forget, and just before I could finish reading, I noticed a second line that made everything stop. That second line was not long, but it carried a weight that made my chest tighten, because he wrote that he had never told anyone what truly happened that day. Not even the people closest to him. For a moment, I felt a strange sense of relief, quickly followed by a deeper unease, because silence can hide more pain than anger ever could. I sat down slowly, the paper trembling in my hands, as memories I had buried for decades began to surface without warning. I could see myself at 17 again, standing in that same place, hearing his voice, and choosing something I have regretted ever since. Back then, I told myself I had no choice, that I was young and scared. But reading his words now made those excuses feel weak and hollow. He wrote that he had waited for me to say something, anything, but I never did. And that silence changed the course of his entire life. Then, just as I thought I understood what he meant, I reached the final sentence on the page, and it made me realize this letter was not about the past at all. The final sentence was simple, but it carried a quiet urgency that made my pulse quicken, because he wrote that he would be in my town for just one day, and he wanted to see me face to face after all these years. For a moment, I could not breathe, because I had imagined many ways the past might return, but never like this, never with an invitation I could not easily ignore. I stood there in my small kitchen, the letter still open in my hand, as a sudden wave of fear washed over me, followed by something I had not expected. A faint, uneasy hope. I told myself I was too old for this, that some doors should remain closed. Yet my heart refused to listen, beating faster with every passing second. He did not say why he wanted to meet, and that silence felt louder than any explanation could have been. As the hours passed, I found myself staring at the clock, knowing the day he mentioned was closer than I wanted to admit. And then I noticed one small detail at the bottom of the letter that made everything feel even more uncertain. At the very bottom of the letter, beneath his name, there was a small note that I almost missed, and when I read it, a cold feeling settled deep inside me, because he had written the exact time and place where he would be waiting. It was not somewhere distant or unfamiliar, but a quiet spot I knew all too well, a place tied to a memory I had spent years trying to forget. My first instinct was to refuse, to protect myself from whatever truth might be waiting there. Yet something stronger kept pulling me back to that single line. I tried to distract myself, moving through my day as if nothing had changed. But every small task felt heavier, as if time itself was slowing down around me. I could not stop thinking about why he chose that place, and what he expected from me after all these years. As evening approached, I found myself standing by the window, watching the fading light, and realizing that whether I went or not, something had already begun that I could no longer control. The next morning arrived far too quickly, and I woke with a heaviness in my chest that made it clear this was not a day I could escape, no matter how much I wanted to. I moved slowly through my routine, trying to convince myself that I could still change my mind, that I did not have to go. Yet every step felt like it was leading me closer to that place anyway. When I finally stepped outside, the air felt unusually still, almost as if the world itself was holding its breath. And with each step forward, my thoughts grew louder. I kept asking myself what I would say if I saw him, how I would explain something I never had the courage to face before. Part of me feared he would be angry, but another part feared something even worse, that he would be calm, distant, and completely changed. As I reached the street that led to the place he had written, my heart began to race in a way I had not felt in decades. And just before I turned the corner, I saw someone standing there waiting. For a moment, I could not move, because the man standing there felt both familiar and completely unfamiliar at the same time, as if time had reshaped him but left something untouched that I recognized instantly. He stood quietly, not searching, not restless, just waiting, and that calmness unsettled me more than anger ever could have. I took a slow step forward, then another, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. And as I got closer, he lifted his head and looked directly at me. His eyes held mine in a way that made the world around us fade, and in that single glance, 50 years of silence seemed to collapse into one unbearable moment. I expected him to speak first, to say something that would break the tension, but he did not, and that silence felt heavier than anything he could have said. Just as I gathered the courage to say his name, he finally took a step toward me, and what he said next was not what I had prepared for. He stopped just a few steps away from me, close enough that I could see the years written across his face, yet his voice, when he finally spoke, carried a steadiness that caught me off guard. He did not say my name the way I remembered, not with warmth or hesitation, but with a calm certainty that made my stomach tighten. For a moment, I thought he might bring up the past immediately, but instead he asked me a simple question about my life, as if we were strangers meeting for the first time. That unexpected shift left me unbalanced, because I had prepared for anger, even blame, but not this quiet distance. I answered him carefully, choosing my words with caution, while trying to read something in his expression, anything that would reveal what he truly felt. Then, without warning, his tone changed, and he mentioned that day in a way that made the air between us feel heavier. Before I could respond, he took a slow breath and added something that made my heart drop. He said he did not come here for apologies, and those words struck me harder than any anger could have, because they removed the one thing I had quietly prepared myself to offer. For a moment, I stood frozen, trying to understand what he meant, while my mind raced through every possibility of why he would travel all this way after so many years. He looked away briefly, as if gathering something he had carried alone for too long. And when he turned back, his expression had changed in a way I could not read. Then he told me the real reason he wrote that letter, and it had nothing to do with reopening the past the way I feared. Instead, he spoke about something that had been hidden for decades, something connected to that day at 17 that I had never known existed. I felt the ground beneath my certainty begin to shift, because everything I believed about that moment suddenly felt incomplete. Before I could ask the question forming in my mind, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something that made my breath stop completely. In his hand was a small, worn photograph, its edges faded as if it had been carried through too many years and too many hidden moments. And the moment I saw it, something deep inside me tightened. He did not hand it to me immediately. Instead, he simply held it there between us, as if testing whether I was ready to face what it contained. My eyes focused on it, and slowly I recognized the place, then the time, and finally the younger versions of ourselves standing in a moment I had long buried in my memory. But there was something else in the image that made my breath catch, something I had never noticed before. something I was never meant to see at 17. He watched my reaction closely, his expression unreadable, and then he quietly asked if I remembered. What happened just after that picture was taken? I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came out, because I suddenly realized the truth I had carried for 50 years might not be the real truth at all. And then he said one sentence that completely changed everything I thought I knew. He said, very softly, that the photograph was not taken by chance. And those words hit me like a sudden weight I was not prepared to carry. I looked again at the image, trying to steady my thoughts. But now, every detail felt different, as if the picture itself had changed in my hands. He explained that someone else had been there that day, someone I never saw, someone who had been standing just outside my view when everything happened at 17. My throat went dry as he continued, because what he was describing did not match the memory I had protected for decades. I had always believed it was just a simple mistake between two young hearts, something broken by fear and silence. But now he was suggesting there was more, something carefully hidden. I felt my certainty slipping, replaced by a growing unease I could not control. And before I could interrupt him, he took a step closer and lowered his voice even further. What he revealed next made me question not only that day, but everything I thought I had known about him, and about myself. His voice dropped even lower, and what he said next made the air between us feel heavier than before, as if the world itself was pressing in to hear the truth. He told me that the photograph captured only a fragment of that day, not the full story, and that everything I remembered was shaped by fear rather than fact. I tried to interrupt him, but he gently raised his hand, asking me to listen until the end, as though he had carried this for too long to stop now. Then he revealed a name I had not heard in decades, and the moment it left his lips, my body reacted before my mind could understand. My chest tightened because that name belonged to someone I believed had no connection to us at all. He said that person had been watching us that day, and what happened after the photograph was taken was never meant to be forgotten, but carefully hidden instead. I stepped back instinctively, realizing that the truth I came to face might not just change my memory of love, but destroy it completely. And then he said something that made me feel like I never knew my own past. He told me that the person behind that hidden presence had not just been watching, but had influenced everything that unfolded after that moment, quietly shaping decisions I thought were mine. I felt a wave of disbelief rise inside me, because it meant my entire understanding of that teenage mistake was built on something incomplete. My hands trembled slightly as I held the photograph again, but now it felt heavier, as if it carried a truth I was not ready to accept. He said that after that day, something happened that separated us in a way I never questioned, and I suddenly realized I had never asked the right questions at all. I tried to speak, but my voice came out weak, asking him why he was telling me this only now, after so many decades of silence. His expression softened for the first time, and he said he had spent years trying to protect me from this truth, believing silence was kinder than pain. But now, standing here in front of me, he admitted that silence had done more damage than honesty ever could, and what he said next made my heart sink even deeper. He told me that after that day, my life didn't simply move on the way I believed it had, but was carefully redirected without my knowledge, as if someone had quietly closed one door and opened another in its place. I felt my legs grow unsteady, because the idea that my choices might not have been fully mine was harder to accept than any regret I had carried for 50 years. He stepped closer again, lowering his voice, and said there were letters I never received, messages that were stopped before they could reach me, and answers that were taken away long before I ever had the chance to ask. My mind struggled to hold all of it at once, each sentence breaking another piece of the story I thought was real. I asked him who could have done something like that, but he didn't answer immediately, only looked at me with a sadness that felt heavier than anger. Then he finally spoke a name again, slowly, carefully, and this time it felt like the ground beneath me disappeared completely. And just when I thought I had reached the deepest truth, he said there was still one thing I had not heard. He looked at me for a long moment, as if deciding whether the final truth should be spoken or left buried forever. And that silence felt more frightening than anything he had said before. Then he finally admitted that the last piece of the story was not about betrayal or lost love, but about a choice I made that day which I had completely forgotten over time. My mind resisted it instantly, because I had spent my entire life believing I was a victim of circumstance, not someone who shaped the outcome. He slowly handed me the photograph again and pointed to something in the background that I had never noticed, something small but undeniable. It showed me turning away, not frightened, not forced, but making a decision that changed everything between us. My breath caught as he said that he never blamed me, but he also never stopped remembering what I chose in that moment. The weight of his words settled between us, heavy and final, as I stood there, realizing the past I had carried for 50 years was not exactly the truth I believed. And as I looked into his eyes, I understood this was the moment everything ended, and everything began again.